The top 5 impending, inevitable global catastrophes that never happened. Number 5 was Y2K, which was going to be the global computer meltdown that was going to send us back into the dark ages. You see, in the late 1900s, and the world was entering the computer era and all of the data that we have was beginning to digitize, the coders took a shortcut when it came to the timestamp on the year. Instead of doing 4 digits like 1998 or 1999, they just put everything in 2. So we would see 98, 99, and the problem is when it went to 2000, those 2 digits were just going to go back to 00, which means that all of the data and all of the records were going to go back 100 years or just completely reset to 0. I was a young adult at this time, and I even remember the educated and well-informed people saying this was a major problem that was going to set us back. Yet on January 1st, the year 2000, nothing happened. Number 4 is peak oil, an idea that gained a lot of popularity in the United States in 1950, suggesting that we were going to completely run out of oil by 1970, and it was going to set the entire US economy, along with the global manufacturing machine, to a screeching halt. The energy shortage would eventually lead to food shortages, militaries wouldn't be able to operate, and we were going to see wave after wave of global economic catastrophes. The idea was put to sleep because the Western world started getting even more of their oil from the Middle East, and we started finding oil deposits in the most unlikely places planet-wide. Then, around 2001 to 2006, we started to see the idea of peak oil re-emerge until the US started becoming the world's largest oil producer when we hit the shale boom. Number 3 is peak coal, which happened during the late 1800s. The same arguments that were made for peak oil were made for peak coal in the 1860s. The British predicted that we were going to start running out of coal because of how heavily it was being used for the steel revolution. The US and Europe were building skyscrapers, railroads, everything dependent on this metal, and guess what has to be burnt in order to get all that slag? Coal. And just like peak oil, we started to find coal deposits in other parts of the world. We also started switching from coal to oil and other forms of energy. And third, we just started becoming more efficient at how coal was consumed. Number 2, global cooling, the idea that the world's temperature was starting to gradually drop, and by 2020 to 2030, the world will have entered an ice age. This idea wasn't just pushed by the crazies, it was widely circulated in every news outlet, and there were climatologists backing up this notion. The most commonly accepted culprit of this global cooling was air pollution, namely sulfur dioxide. Sulfur dioxide and emissions from other fossil fuels, along with the aerosols that the entire Western world and industrial world was pumping out constantly, was thought to be reflecting sunlight and also keeping it from entering into the earth. And it's true, up until that point, after World War II, the world was cooling. Until it wasn't in the late 1970s. But the largest source of sulfur dioxide actually happened almost 100 years before with the eruption of Krakatoa. To this day, there are still a host of conjectures as to why the world's temperature was actually cooling for that brief period of time. For those of you who are doubting global warming because of the false global cooling, you have to take this into consideration. The tools we have to aggregate data today are galactically better than they were 50 to 60 years ago. Instead of sulfur dioxide being the culprit, it's carbon dioxide, which is a natural insulator, and we are responsible for the extra 2 or 3% of it released into the atmosphere every single year. And just that small percentage can have a world of impact in a negative way. Number 1, last but not least, all of the worldwide famines that were guaranteed to take place because of overpopulation. And this is not a new idea. I'm going to list 3 predicted famines in particular here. In 1798, one of the best economists on the planet, Thomas Malthus, made the prediction that land use for agriculture was growing arithmetically, but the population was growing geometrically. Look at this chart right here. That explains it. Population, land use from agriculture. So before 1900, we were supposed to have witnessed a population collapse due to the hundreds of millions of people dying of famine. What Malthus didn't take into consideration are 3 important factors. 1, supply chain logistics was revolutionizing along with agricultural technology. And 3, immigration to the New World. Then there was the fertilizer shortage of 1900. To be more exact, it was actually a nitrogen shortage. See, the population of the world back then was about 1 billion, and the only way to keep all of these bellies full was through nitrogen-based fertilizer. The main sources of this nitrogen was guano, which is just bird and bat poop, and then saltpeter deposits at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. There wasn't enough guano for all the fertilizer required, and it was very difficult to get to the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean for those saltpeter deposits. So just like the Malthusian catastrophe, people thought within a generation or two we were going to see global famines, but that was stopped because scientists found a way to trap nitrogen in the air through ammonia. We went from being able to feed 1 billion people on this planet to comfortably being able to feed 10 or even 11 billion when that number happens. The crazy fact is that between 80 to 90% of all of the proteins in every human body on this earth is made up of synthetic nitrogen from that invention. Then there was the 1968 book, The Population Bomb, claiming that by 1980 we were going to start to see mass famine, mass energy shortages, and overall collapse in global society because of shortages as a result of our population boom. Yet here we are today. The world's population is 8.25 billion, and we are suffering from food waste, not a food shortage. Here's an even better chart showing the peak population predicted in 2086 and the overall birth rate. Do you see the plummet? Birth rates all across the world are declining, and by 2086 it's predicted that the birth rate is going to start falling below the death rate, and we will start to see the world's population drop. But again, this is just an economic model. Nothing predicts the future with 100% accuracy. So whenever any unhinged fool tells you that the world is going to end or something horrendously catastrophic is going to happen, just remember this post and this picture. I am the Geo Hussar. It is 5 days until the ban. Please follow me on all of my other platforms. Thanks for watching.